On my birthday, my husband gifted me a diamond necklace. Later, I learned it was bought with the money he stole from my father's business and given to my sister-in-law first. I'm writing this with shaking hands at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep anymore. Haven't been able to for months. My name doesn't matter because after what I did, I barely exist anyway. But if you're thinking about cheating on someone who loves you, read this first. Maybe it'll save you from becoming the hollow shell of a person I am now. It started on my 32nd birthday when Mark, my husband of 6 years, surprised me with the most beautiful diamond necklace I'd ever seen. White gold chain, 3-carat pendant that caught light like captured starfire. I cried when he clasped it around my neck because it was so perfect, so thoughtful. He'd been working extra hours at my father's construction company for months, and I thought this was why. "You deserve the world, Sarah," he whispered against my ear. "I'd do anything for you." I should have asked questions. Should have wondered how he afforded something that beautiful on his salary. Should have noticed the way his hands trembled when he put it on me, or how he wouldn't meet my eyes afterward. But I was too busy feeling loved, too busy posting photos on social media, too busy being the center of attention at the family dinner dad for me. That's where I first noticed how Ryan, Mark's older brother, kept staring at the necklace. Not at me. At the necklace. His wife Jessica looked uncomfortable every time her eyes landed on it, and she kept touching her own bare throat like she was missing something. "Beautiful piece," Ryan said when Mark was in the bathroom. His voice had this weird edge to it. "Real diamonds?" "Of course they're real," I laughed, fingering the pendant. "Mark saved up for months." Ryan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah. Months." I should have paid attention to that tone. Should have noticed how Jessica got quiet after that, how she made excuses to leave early. Should have seen the way my father kept glancing between the necklace and Mark with this puzzled expression. But I didn't. I was too busy feeling special. The real problems started 2 weeks later when I ran into Jessica at the grocery store. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed, wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 3 days ago when I'd stopped by their house. "Hey Jess, you okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She stared at me for a long moment, then her eyes dropped to the necklace I was wearing. I'd barely taken it off since my birthday. "That's a beautiful necklace," she said quietly. "Thanks. Mark got it for my birthday. I know it was expensive, but he insisted." I touched it automatically, the way I always did now. Jessica's face crumpled. Actually crumpled, like paper being crushed. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." That's when my world started falling apart. "That necklace," she whispered, looking around like she was afraid someone would have overheard. "Ryan bought me one exactly like it 6 months ago. For our anniversary." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean exactly like it?" "I mean identical. Same chain, same setting, same everything. He said he'd had it custom made." Her voice cracked. "Then 3 weeks ago, he told me he'd lost it. That it must have fallen off somewhere. I've been heartbroken because it was the most thoughtful gift he'd ever given me." The fluorescent lights above us hummed. A cart squeaked past. Normal sounds in a normal world that was suddenly tilting sideways. "There has to be some mistake," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Jessica shook her head. "Sarah, I have pictures. From our anniversary dinner. Me wearing that exact necklace." She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. "Look." I looked. And there she was, radiant and happy, wearing my necklace. The necklace Mark had given me. The necklace he'd supposedly saved months to buy. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Ryan's been acting strange lately. Secretive. He's been taking money from somewhere, I can feel it, but he won't tell me what for." Jessica's voice broke completely. "Sarah, I think our husbands are hiding something from us." That night, I confronted Mark. Showed him the picture on Jessica's phone. Watched his face go white, then red, then white again. "Where did you really get this necklace, Mark?" He tried to lie first. Said it was a coincidence, that jewelry stores sold similar pieces all the time. But I pressed harder and finally, he broke. "I took it," he whispered. "From Ryan's house. He'd hidden it in his dresser drawer and I needed to get you something special for your birthday." "You stole from your own brother?" "No, you don't understand. He bought it with money he stole from your father's company. I found receipts in his truck. He's been skimming from the payroll account for months." Mark's words came out in a rush. I thought I was getting back what he stole from us." The room spun. "What do you mean he stole from Dad's company?" "Thousands, Sarah. Maybe tens of thousands. I have proof." Mark grabbed my shoulders. "That necklace was bought with your family's money. I was just returning it where it belonged." I stared at my husband. This man I'd loved for 8 years, married for 6. This man who'd stood in front of our families and promised to be honest, faithful, true. This man who'd just admitted to theft while accusing his brother of the same thing. "Show me the proof," I said. What he showed me made everything worse. Bank statements, receipts, photographs of documents he'd taken from Ryan's truck. Evidence of systematic theft from my father's construction company. Money that should have gone to employee benefits, to my dad's retirement fund, to the expansion project that would have secured all our futures. "How long have you known about this?" I asked. Mark looked at the floor. 3 months. 3 months? My voice came out as a shriek. "And you didn't tell me? You didn't tell my father?" I was trying to figure out the best way to handle it. Ryan's my brother, Sarah. And if this comes out, it'll destroy the company. Your dad's company. So instead you decided to steal from Ryan? I took back one thing. One thing he bought with stolen money. Mark's voice turned pleading. That necklace should be yours anyway. It was bought with money that belonged to your family. I sat on our bed, holding the necklace in my hands. This beautiful, perfect thing that had made me feel so loved. This symbol of months of thoughtfulness and sacrifice. This lie wrapped in white gold and diamonds. "I can't wear this anymore," I said. "Sarah, please. I know I handled this wrong, but..." "Wrong?" I stood up, the necklace still clutched in my fist. "Wrong doesn't begin to cover this, Mark. You stole from your brother. You hid evidence of theft from my father. You let me wear stolen jewelry for weeks while lying to my face about how you got it. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself." That night, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't stop thinking about how I'd been, how naive. How I'd posted pictures of myself wearing stolen jewelry, how I'd bragged about my thoughtful husband to anyone who would listen. But worse than my embarrassment was what came next. Because when I finally worked up the courage to tell my father what Mark had discovered about Ryan, everything exploded in ways I never could have anticipated. Dad called an emergency audit of the company books. What they found was worse than Mark's evidence had suggested. Ryan hadn't just been skimming from payroll. He'd been systematically embezzling for over a year, hiding it through fake vendor payments and inflated expense reports. The total was close to $80,000. $80,000 that should have gone to employee health care. $80,000 that would have paid for the new equipment Dad needed to compete with bigger companies. $80,000 that represented my father's life work being stolen by someone he trusted like a son. The day after the audit results came in, Dad had his first heart. I sat in the hospital waiting room, still clutching that necklace, while doctors worked to save my father's life. Mark sat beside me, and Ryan sat across from us with Jessica, and none of us could look at each other. "This is all my fault," Mark kept whispering. "If I hadn't taken the necklace, if I'd handled this differently." But it wasn't his fault. Not entirely. Ryan had been stealing for over a year. The damage was already done. Mark's theft of the necklace had just been the thread that, when pulled, unraveled everything. When Dad stabilized, the first thing he asked me was whether the necklace had really been bought with stolen money. "Yes, Daddy," I whispered. He closed his eyes. "Take it off." I unclasped it right there in the hospital room and put it in my purse. I haven't worn it since. But taking off the necklace didn't make any of this go away. Because Ryan's theft hadn't just my father's business. It had destroyed trust in our family that could never be rebuilt. And Mark's handling of the situation had destroyed my trust in him. How do you stay married to someone who hides something that important from you for 3 months? How do you trust someone who thinks theft is acceptable as long as he can justify it? How do you look at yourself in the mirror when you spent weeks wearing the evidence of your family's destruction and calling it love? I couldn't answer those questions. Still can't. But I was about to make them so much worse. Because 3 days after Dad came home from the hospital, when Mark was at work and I was alone with thoughts that wouldn't stop spinning, someone knocked on my door. It was Connor Mills. My college boyfriend. The one who got away. The one who was about to help me destroy what was left of my life. Connor looked exactly like he had in college, just with better clothes and more confidence. Still had those green eyes that used to make me forget my own name. Still had that easy smile that made everything else fade away. "Sarah," he said, and my name sounded different in his voice. Warmer somehow. "I heard about your dad through mutual friends. I wanted to check on you." I should have closed the door. Should have thanked him politely and sent him away. Should have remembered that I was married, that my family was in crisis, that the last thing I needed was complications. Instead, I let him in. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Mark had given me the necklace 3 weeks ago, and Connor listened while I told him everything. About Ryan's theft, about Mark's response, about Dad's heart. about how nothing in my life felt real anymore. You always were too trusting, Connor said softly. Remember in college? You believed everyone had good intentions. Maybe I still do, I said. Maybe that's my problem. It's not a problem. It's one of the things I always loved about you. Loved. Present tense, not past. I should have caught that. Should have recognized the dangerous territory we were entering. But I was so desperate to feel understood, to feel like someone saw me as more than just a victim of circumstances I hadn't created. Mark should have told you about Ryan immediately, Connor continued. The fact that he hid it for months. That says something about who he is. He was trying to protect me. Was he? Or was he trying to protect himself? Connor leaned forward. Sarah, you deserve better than someone who lies to you. Even if he calls it protection. Those words hit something deep in my chest. Something that had been aching since the night Mark finally told me the truth. Connor stayed for 2 hours. We talked about college, about our careers, about paths not taken. When he left, he hugged me at the door, and I let myself remember what it felt like to be held by someone who'd never lied to me. I'm in town for the rest of the week, he said. If you need someone to talk to who isn't connected to all this family drama. I nodded. I was already planning to text him. Mark came home that night exhausted and guilty, the way he'd been every day since Dad's heart. He tried to talk to me about couples counseling, about working through this together, about rebuilding trust. I listened and nodded and felt nothing. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always make you angry. Sometimes it just makes you empty. Sometimes it opens up a space inside you that feels like it could swallow the world. I texted Connor the next morning. We met for coffee at a place across town where no one would know us. Then coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into a long walk through the park where we used to study together 15 years ago. I've thought about you, he said as we sat on the same bench where he'd first kissed me sophomore year. Wondered what would have happened if we'd made different choices. Connor. I know you're married. I'm not trying to complicate your life. His hand brushed mine on the bench between us. I just want you to know that some of us never forgot how special you are. I pulled my hand away, but I didn't move it far. My life is already complicated. Maybe it doesn't have to be. That night, Mark tried to initiate for the first time since my birthday. I let him, but I closed my eyes and thought about Connor's hands, Connor's voice, Connor's way of looking at me like I was the most important person in the world. Afterward, Mark held me and whispered apologies into my hair, and I felt like the worst person alive. But not bad enough to stop. I saw Connor again 2 days later. This time we met at his hotel bar. This time he ordered wine. This time when he told me I deserved better, I didn't argue. Leave him, he said simply. Come to California with me. Start over. I can't just leave. My dad needs me right now. The company will survive without you. Your dad's a strong man, Sarah. He doesn't need you to sacrifice your happiness for his business. Connor made it sound so simple. So logical. Mark had lied to me, had shown me he couldn't be trusted with the big things. My marriage felt broken beyond repair. My family was in chaos because of choices other people had made. Why shouldn't I choose myself for once? I need to think, I said. Connor reached across the table and took my hand. This time I didn't pull away. Don't think too long. Life's short, and you've already wasted too many years on someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. When I got home that night, Mark was waiting up for me. Where were you? He asked. Out. Driving. Thinking. The lies came so easily. I needed space. Sarah, I know you're angry with me. I know I handled everything wrong. But we can fix this. We can get through this together. I looked at my husband. This man who'd given me a stolen necklace and called it love. This man who'd hidden his brother's crimes for months while watching my father get played for a fool. This man who slept beside me every night while I fantasized about another man's touch. Can we? I asked. Yes. If you'll let me try. I nodded because it was easier than explaining that I was already gone. The next day, Connor texted me his flight information. He was leaving in 48 hours. Last chance, the message said. I'm not going to keep chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught. I stared at that text for an hour. 48 hours to decide whether to up my entire life for a man I hadn't seen in 15 years. 48 hours to choose between a broken marriage and a fantasy that might not survive contact with reality. But it didn't feel like a choice between Mark and Connor. It felt like a choice between staying in a life that felt like a lie and running towards something that might be true. That afternoon, while Mark was at work, I started packing. Not everything. Just enough for a few weeks. Enough to figure out what came next. I told myself I wasn't leaving permanently, just taking a break. Just getting some perspective. I was still telling myself lies, but at least these were my lies. I called my sister Emma to tell her I was going away for a while. Away where? She demanded. California. I need some time to think. Sarah, you can't run away from this. Dad needs you right now. The company is in chaos. Mark is trying to fix things. Mark should have tried to fix things 3 months ago when he first found out about Ryan. So you're punishing him forever? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm taking care of myself for once. Emma was quiet for a long moment. There's someone else, isn't there? My silence was answer enough. Sarah, no. Don't do this. Don't throw away your marriage because you're confused. My marriage was thrown away the day Mark decided to lie to me for 3 months. That's not the same thing and you know it. But I hung up before she could say anything else that might change my mind. The last thing I packed was the necklace. I couldn't bring myself to give it back to Ryan or throw it away. It was evidence of everything that had gone wrong, but it was also the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned. I put it in a small box at the bottom of my suitcase and tried not to think about what that said about me. Connor's flight was at 6 p.m. I was supposed to meet him at the airport at 4. At 3:30, I was sitting in my car in our driveway, suitcase in the trunk, divorce papers I'd printed from LegalZoom in my purse. Everything I needed to start over. Mark's truck pulled up at 3:45. He wasn't supposed to be home for 2 hours. I watched him get out, watched him notice my car running in the driveway, watched his face change as he realized what was happening. Sarah? He knocked on my window. What's going on? I rolled it down. I'm leaving, Mark. Leaving for where? Does it matter? He stared at me for a long moment. Then his eyes went to my suitcase visible in the rearview mirror. To the divorce papers on my passenger seat. There's someone else, he said. It wasn't a question. I couldn't lie to him. Not about this. Yes. Mark's face crumpled the way Jessica's had in the grocery store. Like paper being crushed. Who? Connor Mills. From college. How long? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. I looked at my husband, this man I'd promised to love in sickness and health, for better and worse. This man who'd broken my trust but who'd never stopped loving me. A week, I said. Mark stepped back from the car like I'd slapped him. A week? You're leaving me for someone you've known for a week? I'm leaving you because you lied to me. Connor just reminded me what it feels like to be with someone honest. Honest? Mark's voice cracked. Sarah, you don't know anything about him anymore. You haven't seen him in 15 years. I know enough. Do you know he's married? The world stopped spinning. What? Mark pulled out his phone. I did some research when Emma told me you were acting strange. Connor Mills, 34, marketing executive, lives in San Francisco. He showed me the screen. Married to Jennifer Mills for 8 years. 2 kids. The phone showed me Connor's Facebook page. Connor with his arm around a beautiful blonde woman. Connor pushing a little girl on a swing. Connor at a family barbecue, wedding ring clearly visible on his left hand. No, I whispered. Sarah, he's been lying to you. Whatever he promised you, whatever he told you about starting over. He's married with kids. I stared at the photos. At Connor's wedding pictures from 6 years ago. At recent photos of him coaching his son's little league team, his wedding ring catching the sunlight just like the diamonds in my stolen necklace. I have to go, I said. Sarah, don't. Come inside. Let's talk about this. But I was already backing out of the driveway. Already driving toward the airport where a married man was waiting to take me away from my life. I made it halfway there before I pulled over and up in a gas station parking lot. Connor was married. Had been married the whole time he was telling me I deserved better, that life was short, that I should choose myself for once. He'd been lying to me just as thoroughly as Mark had. Maybe more. I sat in my car in that parking lot for an hour, watching planes take off in the distance. Watching Connor's flight taxi down the runway at 6 p.m. exactly. When I finally drove home, Mark was waiting on the porch. Did you meet him? He asked. No. Mark's shoulders sagged with relief. Sarah, we can fix this. We can get counseling, we can work through the trust issues, we can. No, I said. We can't. Because the problem wasn't that Connor had lied to me. The problem was that I'd been ready to leave my marriage for a man I barely knew. The problem was that I'd spent a week emotionally cheating on my husband while he was trying to fix the mess his brother had made. The problem was that I'd become someone I didn't recognize, and I didn't know how to get back to who I used to be. I went inside and unpacked my suitcase. Put the divorce papers in a drawer. Put the necklace back in its box. But I didn't unpack my heart. That stayed closed, locked away where Mark couldn't reach it and where I couldn't anyone else with its broken pieces. 3 days later, Dad had his second heart. This one was massive. The kind that changes everything forever. As I sat in that hospital waiting room again, watching my father fight for his life while Ryan confessed everything to the police and Mark held my hand like I was the most precious thing in the world, I finally understood what I'd almost done. I'd almost abandoned my family when they needed me most. I'd almost run away with a married man while my father was dying. I'd almost destroyed my marriage over a fantasy built on lies and justified by betrayals that weren't even Mark's fault. I was the worst kind of person. The kind who causes pain and calls it self-care. The kind who breaks promises and blames everyone else. Dad survived the second heart, but barely. When he woke up, the first thing he said was my name. "I'm here, Daddy," I whispered. "Don't leave," he said. "Please don't leave." He wasn't talking about the hospital room. Somehow, he knew. Dad never fully recovered from the second heart. The doctor said his heart was too damaged, too weak. He'd need constant care, constant monitoring. The construction company would have to be sold because he couldn't run it anymore and there was no one else qualified to take over. 40 years of building something from nothing, gone because his son-in-law's brother was a thief and his daughter was a cheating coward who'd almost abandoned him when he needed her most. Ryan went to prison. 5 years for embezzlement and Jessica divorced him before the trial was over and moved back to Ohio with their kids. She never spoke to any of us again after she learned Mark had stolen the necklace from her house. I don't blame her. I wouldn't speak to us either. Mark tried everything to save our marriage. Counseling, grand gestures, complete transparency about his finances and whereabouts. He quit working for Dad and got a job with a competitor, even though it meant a pay we couldn't afford. He wanted to remove himself from any situation that might require him to make moral decisions I couldn't trust. But trust isn't something you can fix with good behavior. It's something that either exists or doesn't, and once it's broken, all the therapy in the world can't put it back together. Especially when you're the one who broke it the most. The thing about emotional affairs is that everyone focuses on the betrayal, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is how they reveal who you really are under pressure. When life gets hard, when marriage gets difficult, when the people you love disappoint you, what do? I ran toward someone else's arms. I prioritized my own happiness over my family's crisis. I was ready to abandon a sick father and a husband who was trying his best just because a smooth-talking married man told me I deserved better. That's who I really am. That's who I've always been underneath the good daughter, good wife facade I'd spent 32 years maintaining. Mark figured this out before I did. 6 months after Dad's second heart, he asked for a separation. "I know you didn't physically cheat," he said. "I know you didn't get on that plane. But Sarah, you packed your bags. You were ready to leave Dad while he was dying. You were ready to leave me for someone you hadn't seen in 15 years. I sat at our kitchen table, the same table where he'd once confessed to stealing his brother's necklace, and tried to argue. But I didn't leave. I came back. You came back because Connor lied to you. Not because you chose me. Not because you chose us." Mark's voice was steady, resigned. "If you'd been single, you'd be in California right now." He was right. I knew he was right. We both knew he was right. I said. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to print divorce papers. You were thinking clearly enough to research apartments in San Francisco. Mark pulled out his laptop and showed me the browser history I'd forgotten to delete. You spent 3 days planning a life with another man while I was trying to save our marriage. I stared at the evidence of my betrayal laid out in search terms and bookmark pages. Divorce lawyers near me. Cost of living San Francisco. Jobs for teachers California. 1-bedroom apartments downtown SF. I'd been thorough in my planning to abandon him. "That version of you, the one who could do all this while your father was in the hospital," Mark said quietly, "I don't know how to be married to her. I'm not that person anymore." "Aren't you?" Mark closed the laptop. "Because when I look at you now, all I see is someone who's staying because her escape plan fell through. Someone who's going through the motions because leaving would make her look bad." I wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, in the parts of myself I tried not to examine, I knew he wasn't wrong. I was still angry with him for lying about Ryan's theft. Still felt like he'd broken something between us that couldn't be repaired. Still wondered what my life would look like if I'd made different choices. I was staying because leaving now would be admitting what I'd almost done. I was staying because Dad needed me. I was staying because Connor had turned out to be a liar and I had nowhere else to go. But I wasn't staying because I wanted to fight for our marriage. Mark moved out the next week. We never officially divorced because neither of us could afford a lawyer, but we never lived together again either. We existed in this strange limbo of still being married but completely separate. Dad died 2 years later. Massive heart in his sleep. The doctor said his heart had just gotten too weak to keep going. At the funeral, Mark sat with me in the front row like a proper husband, held my hand while I cried, gave a beautiful eulogy about what a good man my father had been. People told me how lucky I was to have such a supportive husband during this difficult time. After everyone left, Mark and I stood alone in the cemetery where we buried the man who'd loved me unconditionally my entire life. "I think we should make the separation official," Mark said. I nodded. I'd been expecting this. "I met someone," he continued. "Nothing happened while we were still together, but she's good for me. She makes me want to be better." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. Mark deserved someone who would choose him every day, not someone who stayed with him by default. We filed for divorce a month later. No fault, uncontested, everything split down the middle. The house sold for barely enough to pay off the mortgage. Dad's company had been sold to cover his medical bills and what Ryan hadn't stolen. I moved into a small apartment across town and tried to build a life from the wreckage of all my choices. But here's what nobody tells you about destroying your marriage: it doesn't just you and your spouse. It changes how everyone sees you forever. My sister Emma barely speaks to me now. Not because of the affair exactly, but because of what almost happened while Dad was dying. "You were going to leave him," she said at Dad's funeral. "While he was having heart because of the stress. You were going to leave." My mom, who'd always called me her responsible daughter, looks at me differently now. Like she's seeing someone she doesn't recognize. Like she's wondering what other terrible choices I'm capable of making. My friends from our couples group sided with Mark after the divorce. Not in an obvious way, but in the quiet way that really hurts. Suddenly I wasn't invited to game nights anymore. Suddenly their group texts didn't include me. They knew about Connor. Mark never told them directly, but word gets around in a small town. Everyone knew I'd almost left my husband for another man while my father was in the hospital. That's my reputation now. That's my legacy. Not Sarah the good daughter, Sarah the dedicated teacher, Sarah the loyal wife. Sarah who almost abandoned her dying father for a married man she'd known for a week. I teach kindergarten now, and I'm good at it. Kids don't judge your past the way adults do. They just want someone who pays attention to them, who cares about their day, who notices when they're sad or excited or proud of something they've accomplished. But at the end of the day, I go home alone to my small apartment with its hand-me-down furniture and its view of the parking lot. I eat dinner by myself and watch TV shows I don't really care about and try not to think about the life I used to have. Sometimes I take out the necklace. I kept it after everything that happened, though I'm not sure why. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe as punishment. Maybe because it's still the most beautiful thing I've ever owned, even though it was built on lies and theft and betrayal. I hold it up to the light and watch the diamonds sparkle, and I think about choices. About the moment on my birthday when Mark clasped it around my neck and I felt so loved. About the moment in the grocery store when Jessica showed me her picture and everything started falling apart. About the moment Connor knocked on my door, and I let him in instead of sending him away. All those moments when I could have chosen differently. Could have asked harder questions, could have demanded honesty, could have protected my marriage instead of looking for exits. Could have been the person I thought I was instead of the person I really am. Last month, I ran into Jessica at the mall. She was visiting for Christmas with her new boyfriend, a kind-looking man who held her hand and carried her shopping bags and looked at her the way Mark used to look at me. "Sarah," she said, and there was no warmth in it. Just acknowledgement. "Jessica. You look good. Happy." "I am." She glanced at the man beside her. "This is David. David, this is Sarah. Mark's ex-wife." David nodded politely, but I could see Jessica had told him the story. Could see the way he looked at me, the way people look at someone they've heard is not quite trustworthy. "How is Mark?" Jessica asked. "He's good. Remarried. Happy." "I heard. She seems lovely." There was a long pause. People walked around us, carrying shopping bags full of Christmas presents, probably going home to families who trusted each other. "The necklace," Jessica said finally. "Do you still have it?" "Yes." "I want you to know something. When Ryan bought that necklace for me, it was the first time in our marriage I felt like he really saw me. Like I was worth something precious to him." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the old pain underneath. "For 3 months, I wore it everywhere. I felt beautiful. I felt loved." I nodded, not sure what to say. Then it disappeared, and I felt like I'd lost something irreplaceable. Like I'd lost proof that someone had loved me enough to give me something beautiful. Jessica's eyes met mine. But Ryan never loved me enough to not steal from your family. And you never loved Mark enough to not look for someone else. The minute things got difficult. Jessica, that necklace represents everything wrong with both our marriages. Men who took shortcuts instead of doing the hard work. Women who accepted pretty lies instead of demanding truths. She adjusted her purse on her shoulder. I hope someday you throw it away. She walked away with David, and I stood there in the middle of the mall, surrounded by happy families and Christmas music, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Because she was right. The necklace does represent everything wrong with my marriage. Everything wrong with me. I accepted a beautiful lie and called it love. I planned to run away when life got hard and called it self-care. I broke promises and betrayed trust and called it finding myself. And now I live with the consequences every single day. Mark is happy. He married a woman named Claire who teaches at his daughter's school. Yes, his daughter. They had a baby 6 months after our divorce was final. A little girl who will grow up with a father who chose her mother every single day, not just when there were no other options. I see them sometimes at the grocery store or the gas station. Mark.